All right, so now we're going to go on a bit of a trip. Lewis Baarda, Farming Smarter, is going to talk Crop Trek, the search for innovation. Lewis is the on-farm research authority at Farming Smarter. He uses his experience with spatial analysis and multivariate stats to conduct field-scale research with farmers throughout southern Alberta. His recent studies have given him expertise with variable rate technology, soil sensors, remote sensing, and other agricultural technologies. Everyone, welcome Lewis.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lewis. I do a bunch of stuff, as you just heard. And today I'm going to talk about Farming Smarter put together an agro-tourism trip to check out Brazil last October. So myself and Jamie from Farming Smarter and about 20 other agriculture enthusiasts from southern Alberta headed down to Brazil for a couple of weeks. And yeah, I'm just going to kind of share a little bit about the experience and what we learned there. I'll be honest, I always kind of like to do some background research and reading, but we left middle of October, so I don't think I cracked my book till I was en route. So I kind of went there not knowing a lot about what to expect. I knew they're good at soccer. I know there's Brazilian barbecue and Mardi Gras and all that kind of stuff, but as far as the agriculture side, I didn't really know what I was getting into. So why head down to Brazil? Why spend, close to 24 hours in transit to see this country? Well, personally, I knew it wasn't going to be a lot like my last trip, which looked a little bit like this. So knowing I didn't have 20 hours of that ahead of me was a pretty good start. So why go to Brazil? Brazil's probably... Every stat I look at is a little bit different, but it's one of the biggest countries, top 5 for sure, maybe the biggest as far as arable land. So I've got a chart here. You can see Brazil's grown a ton in the last kind of up to 1980 or so as far as the cultivated land, and then it's flatlined. So there's a lot of work to sort of preserve the rainforest and those natural ecosystems, but 2.5 million square kilometers, and that's about 4 times as much arable land as Canada. So they're a big player, and there's a lot going on there. They've been known a lot for sort of the citrus, coffee, sugarcane type production, sort of traditionally, but in the last 20 years, they've expanded into some more of the, soybeans, corn type crops. So here's a bit of a snapshot comparing Brazil to Canada for crop production. So the coffee and sugarcane stuff isn't on there, but you'll see 169 million metric tons of soybeans produced in Brazil, and that's about 40% of the global production of soybeans. So it's quite frankly absurd how much soybeans they're producing, and just about every region, lots of heat, double cropping, all sorts of things. So big producers of soybeans, big producers of corn, but after you get through those 2 major crops, the diversity drops big time. So there's not a lot of acres of about anything else there. So it's a lot of different specialty things. You compare that to Canada, lots of wheat, canola, corn, kind of our big ones, barley, some soybeans as well. So you even just looking at that, if you were, looking at the economic concentration, like your index would be a lot more diverse for Canada than for Brazil. So as a geographer by training, I'd be remiss if I didn't include a map. So we visited 2 different regions in Brazil. The first was Parana State, which is in the southern region of the country. So that's where it's a little more temperate climate. It's kind of that Cerrado, savanna type biome. And then we spent a couple of days, or 4 or 5 days up in Mato Grosso, and that's a little further north, a little warmer weather, and that's kind of getting into the fringe of the rainforest. So here's just a couple of shots of what Parana State looked like. So when we got there in October, corn was getting going and soybeans were being put in the ground. So here's kind of what things look like a little bit. Here's another shot, just maybe different farming system. And what was really cool about the trip was having the chance to actually directly meet people in Brazil that were connected to the industry. So we got to talk to farmers, we got to engage with folks doing research, and like a shout out to our facilitator, the guide in Brazil, Chico, was fantastic. I've done a few of these kind of trips before, and he was a cut above the rest. So if you're looking to go to Brazil, let me get you his contact info. He was excellent. So this farm we visited here, this is the Frank Anna farm. And the fellow we talked to, I mean, his story of starting agriculture in Brazil was pretty emblematic of other farmers in the region. And that's, different waves of European immigration coming into the country throughout the, 20th century, right? So Brazil's had different waves of Europeans come in the 30s, a big one in the 50s and in the 70s. So in this case, this family came in the 50s, post-war, so it's a Dutch family, and they came out there and they struggled to make a go of things, trying to, adapt their European practices to a totally different environment. Which is kind of similar to the story here, like, listening to Kevin tell us his story, I don't know where he is, but about kind of, getting to the zero-till thing and different practices. I mean, it was exactly the same there, and I have a book I meant to bring with me that was written by this guy's grandfather, the father of zero-till in Brazil, Frank Dijkstra, a good Dutch name. But he was one, I looked into it a little more, he's one of about 16 or 20 fathers of zero-till in Brazil. But they really struggled. And actually, from this book, I found out that the Dutch government sent experts over to Brazil to help these Dutch farmers figure things out and get rolling. So I thought that was, just really interesting. So they've got this, kind of light soil, highly oxidized, red-looking soil. And, when the rains come, if there's not crop cover there, they're losing things in a hurry. So we did get the chance to kind of get out, check out the fields, look at how they're actually doing things, and lots of residue, right? They're seeding into residue all the time. There's always residue, and I looked at a chart of adoption of conservation tillage, and it's just gone up and up and up, and that's been a big part about how Brazil's been able to increase production even though their land base has stabilized. So this is just a quick shot of what the rotation looks like, maybe in this region. Like this particular farm, I think was a little more progressive than what you might see broadly, but they're trying to fit in 5 separate crops over a 2-year rotation, which is just crazy. So you think about, the ability, they've got the biggest land base of arable land, and they're fitting 5 crops in 2 years. So there's, a ton of opportunity there. So we got there in October, so corn was getting going, soybeans were being planted. So after the corn, they'd roll into white beans, then barley, soybeans again. So for them, the winter is sort of that July, August, and they actually had frost the previous year, so there is a risk of getting those frost events. That black oats in the second year, that's just a cover crop following wheat, so that's just to kind of hold the soil in place, keep things protected, keep ground cover until they can seed corn ahead of the next warm season. So here's some of the corn. Again, plenty of residue underneath. Another farm we visited, this fellow's Bruno, son of Bruno. So German farmer, so they, again, immigrated sort of post-war time. And again, just really nice to be able to talk to these folks about some of the real challenges that they're dealing with. And, one of the big things, just about everybody we talked to made sure they told us about, the legislation and the regulations surrounding how much of their farmland has to be preserved as forest. So in the Parana State southern area, depending on the region, it could be 10, 20, up to 40% of their land has to remain forest. Up in Mato Grosso, closer to the Amazon, 80% of their land has to stay in forested acres. So, and it's highly, it's very punitive and very closely regulated. So they're very worried about the perception of us. They asked us, well, what do you think, what are you hearing about farmers in Brazil and about the rainforest? And there had been big forest fires about 18 months before we went there, which we recalled seeing on the news. And they said, well, that's not us, that's not us. There's people who want land for other reasons. But, if we were to burn down half an acre of land, we'd be punished and we wouldn't be able to hardly farm again. So similar to us, we have some of the same issues with public perception on the things we're doing. They've Brazil's political climate's been kind of a flip-flop. They had somebody with a small L liberal government, small C conservative government, and they're back to the guy they had before who spent time in prison, and it seems like lots of countries in the world are doing this back and forth. And I tried to ask some a little bit pointed questions about, what they thought about some of the policies in administration, and they were honestly nervous to be open about it. It's not the kind of climate where they're open to being, or comfortable being open about their concerns about their government. Labor's always a concern for a lot of these farmers. Some of them were fortunate to live close to some, urban areas, but when they lived further away, often some of these farms would have, little communities set up with schools and churches and have a place where people could work on the farm, make a career, and actually make a living there without, spending hours and hours on the road every day. So here's, again, still this southern region, soybeans, and yeah, again, lots of residue. And in this case, when we drove up to the spot, I mean, it was soybeans as far as you could see. Everything looked just like this in this stage. So as much as there's a ton of opportunity in Brazil, I think that diversification challenge is going to be a big hurdle for them to overcome. So one of the most interesting aspects of the trip to me was these big agricultural cooperatives. And it's like a major feature of the agricultural landscape in southern Brazil. So these cooperatives, basically they're set up to do everything for the farmer. So you can see that factory in the background, and they all have a bit of a different genesis, but these Dutch farmers that kind of work together, well, they set up their own cooperative 50 years ago, and it performs all sorts of services. It helps source their seed, it gives them seed treatment, it sources fertilizer, it markets their product, it provides research and agronomy, just about everything. So you pay a fee to be a part of the cooperative. In some cases, if you're a founding member, you pay a lower fee and you can be on the board, but everybody is, you're highly incentivized to be a part of a cooperative. And some of these are so big, they've got $7 or $8 billion, net revenues at the end of the year. So it's big business. So I'll kind of touch on some of the services they perform. Research is for sure one. So they do, I think we visited 4 or 5 different research foundations or organizations tied to some of the cooperatives, and they're doing the same kind of small plot research we're doing. A lot of same equipment that, I saw about 30 Wintersteiger combines over there, just like we've got in our shop, and they're looking at rotations and different ways to till and disease. They're doing crop breeding. So here's some barley. They're trying to breed barley. So this area, Brazil's not known for its barley, but this was a barley producing region. Here they're baking some sand and soil samples because nematodes is a huge issue. They're growing tons of soybeans, right? So that's actually one of their biggest pest pressures. So they're baking the soil samples to do pot tests so that they've got an uncontaminated baseline. Biostimulants was a huge thing. This picture's from one of the big companies, not a cooperatives, but I mean, everywhere we went, everybody was talking about biostimulants. They're using them to help their crops grow better and manage pests and everything else. And we always would ask, well, what's a biostimulant? What does that mean? I don't think we ever got a really good definition. So that's probably a little bit similar to here as well. But they're really thinking about how to, continue to sustainably grow their crops and reduce inputs. So in this case, they're actually developing pathogens that they can release to take care of pests. So just really interesting. And every farm is doing it. And and they kind of do all this stuff in-house. I don't think there's a lot of government support for that research side of thing. It's sort of like the companies or the cooperatives have the buy-in from the farmers, and that supports research. So we're looking at, hundreds of employees kind of directed towards research. They perform extension function. This is a farm show that's probably happening right now that one of the cooperatives we visited put on. So I think they started in 1989 with about 15 exhibits, and last year they had 400,000 people going through with 600 different exhibits. So things are growing in a big way, and I think they're working to kind of have this exchange of ideas and technology and all these kind of pieces. So it was really cool to see how much they're kind of working on all those things. The cooperatives are also looking at value added. So Agraria, one of the German cooperatives we visited, so they've kind of doubled down on barley and malt barley in particular. So they have a brewery within their facility, and it's not a commercial brewery, but it's set up to they're brewing their malts and they're bringing in clients from all over the world and showing them hey, this is the high value, beer we can brew with your malt. Here's what it looks like. And they actually have a school in the facility as well where they're training people how to brew these malts so they can send these people, to these companies to kind of brew their malt properly. So just really creative way to sort of, add value to their products and get the best market they can for it. So of course we thought we might as well test their brew as well. And why not give it a second test? And test it again just to be sure. So really neat the way they're set up to kind of, externally facing, right? They're working together to develop, export markets and a specialized product they can sell to, premium clients around the world. So another piece to these cooperatives is the cultural aspect, and it was kind of wild. This town Castrolanda has this Dutch windmill built in 2002 to commemorate 50 years there, and so I sent a picture of it to my wife, and she said, "Oh, are you in Castrolanda? I've been there." So maybe I should have talked to her if I wanted to learn about Brazil before I went. So I got a bit of a lesson when I got home about that one. And then they've got a museum. So these cooperatives, they're investing in culture in a big way as well. So there's the Agraria supports this German cultural center. The people came from the Danube region of Europe, and some of the folks that they decide whether they want to be part of a cooperative or which one they may want to join, and they may choose not to support a certain one because they don't want a big chunk of their investment to go to the cultural aspect of it. But it was kind of neat to see them celebrating their own culture, and we got to experience that in a very real way. So we were able to join their Festa de Cevada, which is their barley festival. So yeah, just really very German festival. If you're going to see a bunch of German flags in Southern America, these are probably the ones you want to see. So I don't know, this video's not playing, but anyways, they cooked a whole bunch of fish for us. So they did this like charcoal grill, 5,000 different fish, anchovies, and bear with me. There. Okay. Yeah, so everybody got, giant fish to eat and a couple loaves of bread and beer and then here they are, they're celebrating their dance, right? So these kids, they go to school, they learn German from a very young age, they learn all these cultural aspects of traditional dance, and, if you're wondering what the music sounds like, it's exactly as German as it looks, tubas and everything else. So it was, really cool to see. I even made a friend. Lederhosen and all that jazz. So that was kind of cool to see. So there's sort of this like community and cultural aspect to it that was kind of unique from anything I'd kind of seen before. A little bit of Canadian content, some potassium fertilizer. So the cooperatives are, they're sourcing fertilizer, and just about everything in that country is shipped by truck. They don't have a rail system. We drove past a couple of places where they were developing it, and nobody was super confident things were really going to happen with it. But it's all trucks, so it's a load of soybeans to the coast and the backhaul of fertilizer back to the farm. So. Pretty crazy. Like, I think that logistics is another challenge that if they get that figured out, that's going to really streamline things for them as well. So we did get a chance to see some of the scenery. So this is Iguazu Falls, pretty famous. A bunch of movies have been filmed there. I don't know if you've seen Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That was filmed here. I think my film is a little better than theirs, but yeah, really cool. Lots of natural beauty over there. Just awesome to be able to see some of these things. Yeah, just, I don't know, soak it in. That was really, really cool to be there and check that out. So. I had so many pictures. Like we saw so much stuff. It was really hard to be judicious about things and say, okay, what do I cut? What do I keep? Like if you ever get a chance to go somewhere else and see what's happening, absolutely take it. It's really cool. So after we spent our time in the south, we headed up to Mato Grosso state. So it's a little bit different biome, kind of a lot hotter, distinct summer and winter season. And it's corn and soybeans. That's kind of the majority of what's happening there. And there's a little bit of cotton as well. So that's sort of that central region on the edge of the rainforest. So cotton was brand new to me. I had never seen it before, but it's essentially like a little tree, right? Like you think it's a plant, but the amount of work they have to put into cotton to get it to grow is wild. They every 3 or 4 days they're in there applying something to kind of keep it going. And because it's a little tree, they're applying some sort of PGR type product onto it to kind of keep it small enough so it will set seed, produce cotton in a crop season rather than a multi-year process. And then you've got soybeans growing in there after, in that woody residue. So this is kind of what their crop rotation looks like. And you can see the value of having, genetic advancements in a short season soybean, because the shorter your soybeans are, you can, if you have a short enough season soybean, you can fit in your cotton or corn in the same calendar year as it. So, and when we were there, like we drove for miles and miles, and all we saw was cotton stubble and soybean either growing or being planted. So not a lot of diversity. But we got to visit Bonfuturo, which is one of the biggest cotton farms in the world. Yeah, 1.5 million acres. So that, just incredible the size of this thing. And I was listening to something after, and they were commenting on this particular farm and how it has something like 5,000 engines, so tractors and trucks and all these kind of things. 5,000 engines on this farm. So it gives you a sense for the scale of what's happening there. So this cotton plant, they're producing, every step along the way, right? So it's raw cotton, different grades of cotton seed. You get some meal out of it, some oil, and then that third from the right, that's like a briquette. So all the husks are compressed into a briquette. So, Brazil doesn't have access to, natural gas like we do, right? So for their energy needs, they're burning a lot of eucalyptus wood, which they might even plant and harvest because it grows quite fast. So they thought, well, if we compress these cotton husks, we can kind of use that as a source of energy. But they weren't able to sell it because it's not as efficient as the eucalyptus, but they can run it internally to kind of run their own operations. So here's just kind of a look at, their processing plant. And this thing was like 5 or 6 years old, like all brand new. Like they're putting this together. They invested in a big way. And, the technology involved in this, they're tracking every single bale that they produce in the field. They know what part of the field it comes from. The bales that are on the edge of the field, they separate out later because they're a lower quality cotton because some of the dirt and residues are blowing in and they contaminate and discolor the cotton, right? So they've got this giant, field behind them and rows of bales, and they know which bale comes from where. They take samples, 2 samples from every bale they produce, and then they've got somebody whose full-time job is just to grade all these cotton samples. So this is sort of the grading room, and it has special lights. It's got special paint job just so that they can, see the quality. They're feeling the texture. They're looking at the color, grading the quality, and then they'll roll this whole thing into, it's like a little paint swatch, right? And they have clients come from around the world, and they're looking at this subjective grading of this cotton and deciding whether or not to buy this to, make jeans in Indonesia or whatever the case is. So yeah, just really cool, this sort of, value-added piece in the energy and investment they're making into, creating export markets to make their industries viable. So yeah, they roll them up. The clients come in, they unroll a couple and negotiate on price so they know what they're dealing with. And then there's trust and there's this security tracking system so they know which bales to pull, what truck to put them on, and where to send them. So that was a highlight. That this Bonfuturo was really, really cool to see. Yeah, and then before we wrapped up, we had a chance to go see Rio, so Copacabana Beach and Christ the Redeemer statue. Like super, super cloudy day. We were kind of like looking up at the mountain, couldn't see anything but clouds. It's like, are we going to see it or not? And then, yeah, I don't know, the clouds parted and there Jesus was. So I guess that was kind of cool to see. So I don't know if I was nervous or excited, but that was something. I was nervous. Yeah. So anyways, by way of takeaways, I've kind of, I don't know, just so much. There's a few people here that were on the trip. Like if you have a chance, like chat to some of these folks because everybody's perception is going to be different. We're going to have different things we take away. But number one is just what a powerhouse Brazil is. You just to be able to see the scale and scope of things. They're doing multiple crops, science and innovation driving things, right? I mean, the amount of resources they're putting towards research and innovation is pretty incredible. And they've got not just people that are trying things in the field, but they've got, each cooperative has like a specialist in certain areas and they know their stuff and they work together and they figure things out. And yeah, that was pretty cool. They're vertically integrated, right? The cooperatives, it's like from the farm to the marketing to the value added, so they can make things happen in a hurry and capitalize on global markets, right? I mean, first they capitalized on China, right? They're sending, like the other BRICS countries, they're sending all this stuff to China. I think 60% of what they produce goes to China, but they're also developing these specialty markets, cotton or malt barley, right? So they're not hedging their bets too much on one thing. And yeah, I mean, whatever. If we might run into stuff with the U.S., they might run into stuff with China, but they're working on diversifying. I think my other big takeaway was just this idea of community and exchange of ideas. And we saw it in a very real way, there in Brazil, just people pulling back, ideas and concepts from their home country. So the one German farm we went to, they were on a first name basis relationship with the owner of the horse company. And this guy would come and help them solve their equipment problems and help them deal with what's happening. And, Brazil's a huge market for these equipment companies. John Deere's there in a big way, right? So this exchange of ideas and bringing things from different places. And on a personal side, it was like the opportunity to, exchange ideas and go with an incredible group of people, right? So just making memories and sharing ideas and doing something like that. So I think before I finish, just want to shout out Chico. I mentioned him before, but if you're looking at going to Brazil, like I said, he was a cut above the rest. It took care of every possible detail. So definitely ask me for his information because, just consummate professional on that stuff. So with that, I'll let you look at all the people who came, and some of them are here. So if you see them, go ask them some questions. I know, we've been talking a lot about community at Farming Smart and the community, we have, even in this room, and how, a trip like this, kind of consolidates some of those relationships. And I think there's opportunity to do that kind of stuff right here in Southern Alberta, right? We're dealing with certain challenges, and we can kind of work together to solve them. So stay connected with us. And I know Jamie's looking at what another trip might look like, and that might be somewhere overseas again, or it might be somewhere a little closer, but we'd love to stay connected with all of you and share ideas. So thanks for listening to my slideshow.
One quick question from Slido before you get off the stage, Lewis. They said they had low organic matter. Is that one reason they're able to keep a ton of residue on the soil?
Possibly. The organic matter was low. And I think, the conservation tillage has grown a lot in the last, say 20 years, right? So it's kind of a constantly changing thing, right? Like Kevin talked about, he showed us pictures of how his soil has changed, over the last since the 60s with his dad, and I think the same thing is kind of true there. So always kind of changing. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my thoughts on it.